I was reading Germany's subreddit when I stumbled upon a post of someone asking how do people in Germany afford to rent an apartment? And here were some of this person's criteria. They are a single person, so living alone, and they wanted an apartment that is more than 100 square meters. To my surprise, I realized, wow, this is a very luxurious criteria that you got going on there. So in this video, we're going to explore the different sizes of German apartments so you have a better feel for it and you can adapt the size to whatever your current living situation is. Let's start with the governmental baseline.
The German government has established the following housing regulations, which also apply to social housing. And these are based on the minimum amount of size or square meters an apartment or a living space should be, depending on how many people live in it.
Ooh, so maybe here a very nice distinction and something to emphasize is we're talking about square meters. Because maybe in other parts of the world, square meters are not that important and maybe they're not considered for processes or actually when you look for apartments, right? So square meters is definitely the de facto measure that you use in Germany to find apartments.
And not the amount of rooms. Obviously, yes. The amount of rooms also become important depending on your living style or how many people maybe, but the critical amount is really the size in terms of measured size.
Yeah. Okay, sorry for the interruption. Now you can jump into the regulations.
Every member of the family over 6 years has to have 12 square meters of living space. Members between the age of 2 and 6 years old need 10 square meters of living space. And members under 2 years old are exempt from these regulations. However, every single member of the family must be able to share the kitchen, bathroom and toilet. Now these numbers are super important, especially if you would like to have your family live with you based on a family reunification visa, because there is one of the criteria that states adequate living space. And the numbers we just stated are considered adequate living space.
And now the big question is, what is living space, right? One of our viewers actually asked, can you emphasize what this is? So here we go. What is considered living space is a living room, the bedrooms, the children's rooms, an office or a study in the apartment, if you have one, of course, a bathroom. And in case the bathroom has in one area the shower and you have a separate toilet, the separate toilet is also considered a part of the living space, a kitchen, dining room, and a storage room located in the apartment.
Now, on the other hand, there's also space that is not considered living space, but considered use space. And that would be, for example, a storage outside of the apartment, or an undeveloped cellar, basement, or an undeveloped attic.
So we discussed the minimum amount of square meters declared by the German government as suitable for people to live in. But there's of course a maximum that the German government also establishes for receiving especially social benefits.
So the numbers that we are talking about now is of course not the maximum amount that you can live in. By all means, you can choose that for yourself.
Of course.
But this is the maximum amount declared appropriate per personal size of household, where in case you would require support from the government, that if you live in a bigger flat, you will not receive it because you're beyond the appropriateness.
So for one person is 47 square meters. For two people, you would think it's double, but it's not. It is actually 62 square meters. For 3 people, 77 square meters. 4 people, 92 square meters. 5 people, 107 square meters, and any extra person, an additional 15 square meters. So if we take this into consideration, when I was talking about at the beginning of the video of this user asking for a single person's 100 square meters, you can see that this is beyond what an average German lives in. Because as you see on the table, 5 people is on average 107, not an average, but 4 to 5 people is 100 or more.
This is not on average, this is again deemed appropriate by the government.
Sorry,
right?
I said average.
But
yes.
this kind of like reflects the housing market quite well. So let's look at the actual average when it comes to flats in Germany. Very important, these numbers are based on flats only. Doesn't matter whether they're rented or owned, but purely flats. Houses are not taken into account here. And per person, the average size a person lives on in all of Germany is 47.7 square meters,
wow.
Which for me was actually quite a surprise because, I mean, first of all, it matches the maximum appropriate number that the government states of 47 square meters, but it also kind of like dilutes or gives you the idea, oh, for 2 people I can double it, which is actually not the case. Right?
And I would say that's super interesting because we currently live in 47 square meters and you lived for some time in this apartment alone and it was totally fine, right? And for 2 people, it's also doable, but I would say it's a little bit cramped. 3 people, I would say, no way.
Absolutely not, yeah.
So that is a very interesting number, actually.
Yeah, totally. So now let's look at the average size flat in Germany, because there's one thing to talking about square meters on average that you want to live on, but it's another thing of what is actually available out there in terms of construction. And the average size flat in Germany has 92.2 square meters with an average of 4.4 rooms.
Wow.
Which again, to my surprise, I mean, being used to living in cities, this is quite big. I mean, this is the average. That is really huge.
That is really huge, I agree.
And especially with the 4.4 rooms,
wow.
My conclusion, not sure if that's correct, but my conclusion would be that a lot of families really do live in flats.
So this is the average for all of Germany. And of course, Germany is super vast and big, and we cannot take it as the ground number for everything because that's city versus non-city, right? So now let's divide that number a little bit on state-based averages.
Correct. And here we can drastically see that the new states, so the ones that lie in the east of Germany, have a way smaller average size flats than the western areas of Germany. And that is, of course, also historically driven and what was being built, obviously. However, you can also really drastically see that the 3 city-states that Germany has, Berlin, Hamburg, and Bremen, are by far below average and actually more or less on the smallest scale of average-sized apartments. And this is a very good indicator, which only makes sense, that cities on average have smaller flats available than rural areas because more people live on a smaller amount of space.
Yeah, it goes the same to say the NRW region, which is actually the most populated region in Germany. It also falls below average in terms of square meters for flats. Now let's jump into a real example. So we wanted to see what is the current market situation in terms of flat rentals in Germany. So the way we did this is we went to Immobilien Scout 24, which is one of the most popular websites to find flats in Germany for renting and even buying, I would say. And there we, on a very specific date, not a very specific date, but on a date in December 22, we looked at all the available flats per the most popular cities for internationals in Germany. And there we did a comparison of available flats based on the size of the flat in terms of square meters and also available rooms.
In our comparison table, we looked at the 6 most popular cities for internationals in Germany, at least as based on our opinion, and those
also based on research on the amount of internationals finding jobs.
That's true. Yes, yeah. And you've seen these cities in other videos that are based on numbers. Yeah. And those are Düsseldorf, Berlin, Hamburg, Munich, Frankfurt, and Stuttgart. And now let's start looking at the available flats in December 2022 based on size. We put the filter at smaller and bigger than 90 square meters. We just took that instead of 92.2. That was, 90 is a good size to go for. And to no surprise, our own research confirmed the statistics that we already received from the city-states, that of course cities per se, or big cities, have on average more availability for smaller sized flats than, let's say, in rural areas. Because Pi mal Daumen, 75% in all of those 6 cities of available flats are smaller than 90 square meters. What's interesting is that Berlin and Hamburg, 2 city-states that have quite a tight housing market currently, have even more than 75% of smaller apartments, smaller than 90 square meters, available.
That is super interesting. Also, it shows that because, of course, then above 90 square meters is not, it's what you say, there's not so much offer.
There's more scarcity.
There's more scarcity. This also means that these apartments tend to be a lot more expensive in cities.
Totally, because the apartment rental price, buying and rental price in Germany is not purely, but hugely based on the square meter size.
Yes, and we have a lot of friends who they start growing their family and suddenly they realize, wow, we need a new apartment, and they start scouting the market, trying to remain in the city, and that just becomes hard and almost impossible. And most of them actually move out of the city because I think this reflects the reason why.
These numbers are only more supported when we look at the number of rooms. And here we need to define, first of all, what is considered a room in Germany.
Let me actually explain that because I like that caveat, right? So when you see rooms in Germany, you have to know that the living room is also considered a room. So when you find apartments that are 1-room apartments, this is pretty much a studio, meaning that most likely the living room and sleeping or a bed would be together in the same room.
Will be together, yeah.
Yeah, in an open area. Now, if you look for 2 rooms, that means you will have a living room and a bedroom. So let's say you're looking for a 3-bedroom apartment, then you should be looking for a 4-room apartment in whatever search engine you use to actually look for apartments in Germany.
Correct, yeah. So our comparison table shows that the majority of available flats have 2 or 3 rooms, so 1 or 2 bedrooms, which again supports the size of below 90 square meters, because typically with 90 square meters you could maybe go have to 3, maybe 4 rooms depending on how the flat is sized. What stands out again is that Berlin and Hamburg, but also Düsseldorf, again density with the entire also Rhein-Ruhr area, have more available 2-room flats than 3-room flats. So even smaller, because 2 rooms again usually also implicate smaller square meters than 3 rooms. On average, I mean, there's always exceptions to the rule, right?
Right.
Versus Frankfurt and Stuttgart, where maybe the housing market is not as tight, have more availability in 3-room apartments.
That is super interesting. I would also like to emphasize, not to confuse you, that when we talk about rooms, we already clarified that the living room is 1 room, but the kitchen and the bathroom, they're included. They don't count as extra rooms, right? Of course, then when you're doing search, you can find for 2 bathrooms. Usually some flats have 2 bathrooms, but they don't count as part of this room quantification that we're talking about.
Yes, so 2-room apartment always has an additional kitchen
and a bathroom. Yes.
Which doesn't mean that the kitchen couldn't be also in the living room.
Yes, fair
Open
point.
space living, you know.
Yes. To learn how to find an apartment in Germany more smoothly, then make sure to click on the video that's here on the left. Until next time, cheers!